to tell y'all today a little bit about Florida, the Sunshine State. This is Florida's flag right here. This X is, it comes from the old Confederate flag, and this is the seal of their state, and then they have a white background. So just wanted to include that. They're one of very few states left that has Confederate symbols still in their state flag. This is just a fun map of Florida. It includes, some of the major cities, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami. But then also, just kind of the general Florida vibe and what people know it for. So today we're going to be learning about the demographics of Florida, its political history, state and national level politics, and some current events. The demographics, Florida has about 21.5 million people. They're about 53% white, 17% black, 26% Latino, 3% Asian, and 0.5% Native American. 88% of their population has a high school diploma and 29% have a bachelor's degree or higher. Their median household income is $53,000 and 12.7% of Florida's population lives in poverty. These estimates are from the U.S. Census Bureau 2019. And next I have a couple of maps to show you guys. These are not necessarily as good as the maps that I found of Texas, but they're maps. So again, I wanted to show you all this just because I'm a visual learner and I want you guys to be able to see what's going on here. So this is Florida's median age. A lot of people have heard about how Florida has a lot of old people. So this was their median age in 1970, and then this is their median age in 2010. So you can see, right here and in here, there are some populations of old people, but generally the state tends to be people from their 30s to 50s. And then this is a map of the 2018 election results. So this also just shows you, obviously, the lighter red areas had a smaller percentage of people vote Republican than the darker red areas, and the same thing with the blue. The darker the color is, the more people voted that way. And then this is population density. So if we look at population density and we go back to these election results, we can see similar patterns where more populous areas also vote slightly more liberal. So again, this is the same urban and rural divide that's in the rest of the country. So this is population density. The red areas are very dense. The green areas are not very dense. And then I was trying to find a map of Florida with its ethnicities to really show you guys the diverse population that's in Florida. I had a hard time, but I found this map and I thought it was pretty good. So it does show you, it's a little dated, but it does show you, the percent white, African American, and Hispanic, and then where those populations are located at. So if we pay most attention to just the white population and then the Hispanic population, you can say that the Hispanic population lives in the more dense areas versus the white people live more in the northern area of Florida. They live in the southern tip as well, but not as much as they live in the north part. And then this, we can see on this African American map right here, I think that is the southern part of Georgia, maybe. Anyway, so we can see there's also a concentration of African Americans in that panhandle of Florida. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the political history of Florida. Florida's sense of southern has always been unsettled. Unlike other southern states, it's never really had that southern identity. It was the last southern state to be settled, particularly because, there was no reason to live in Florida. There was nothing there. There's nothing there. So the pre-World War II population was in the Panhandle, and it was basically, Alabama and Georgia. And post-World War II, people really started to move to that state. The two things that changed that really drove that population increase was the railroad and air conditioning, because nobody wanted to live in Florida before AC. It was too hot. And so this is a cool map that I found. United States population density. This is from, I think, 1900, yeah. And so you can see really, the darker areas, it's more dense population. But you can see in this southern part of Florida, what it says up here is under 2 inhabitants to the square mile in the white part. So that's just the entire southern tip of Florida. And then 2 to 18 people in the per square mile. So pretty much the southern part of Florida is there's just not that many people. Like I said earlier, they're in the panhandle. So, it was a one-party system in most of the 20th century. This is due to geography, but also decentralized government. Similar to much of the rest of the South, they had, they wanted a limited government. They didn't want a lot of power in their government. So their legislature was set up in a way that favored rural interest in an increasingly urban state. From the Reconstruction until 2003, the Florida's governor sat on a cabinet that had 6 state elected officials. And so on cabinet issues, each person had one vote. And so the governor was very limited in the things that he or she could control in matters under cabinet's jurisdiction. And the government structure was created to be amorphous, vague, and fluid. Their structure did not make a lot of sense, and it didn't lead to a lot of power. And like much of the rest of the South, they had a conservative Democratic Party throughout most of the 20th century. The growth in business, population, and tourism after World War II definitely threatened that established Democratic Party. The rural legislators, they had to, go against governors that were representing more urban populations. So there was, obviously there was some discord. They tried to redistrict several times, but none of the bills ever made it to the floor of the state house. So as a result of that, they wrote a new state constitution in 1968. It was their 6th constitution. After the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the districts that they had were no longer legal. They just were illegal under that. They also, these district lines favored the rural northern Florida pork chop gang, which is pretty funny. So basically, the rural part of the state had more control than the urban part. And so they also were able to do, more heinous racial acts and get away with it. And also in 1968, the Constitution eliminated the ban on racially integrated schools because that was also illegal. Going into some state level politics here, their 1968 Constitution, like I said, is their 6th Constitution. It's in that they review that Constitution every 20 years. Their government has 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Their executive branch consists of the governor, lieutenant governor, cabinet, and other executive departments. They still have that cabinet today that I mentioned earlier, but now they only have 3 members on cabinet. Instead of 7 members. So they have 3 members plus the governor. And then some of those members that used to be on cabinet are now appointed by the governor. And each office term is limited to 2 4-year terms, so they are term limited. They have a legislative branch, a Senate, and a House of Representatives. The Senate has 40 members and the House has 120. And they also have a judicial branch that is a unified state court system. They have a state Supreme Court, 5 district courts of appeals, and 2 other trial courts. After the revised Constitution, the state still heavily leans toward decentralization, which is common among many parts of the rest of the South. Just because they changed their constitution didn't mean they all of a sudden wanted a strong central government. They still wanted some of that decentralization of power. However, the population of Florida is very different compared to the rest of the South. Floridians have never held a strong attachment to parties. They've always leaned rather towards flux and fluidity. And their changing population has prevented a rise of Democrats within the state. However, now Florida is considered a swing state, so these things have changed over time. And there's two major influences on voters, the geriatric factor and the heritage factor. And so Florida has always been a place for older people to move to. They want to retire and live out their life in a warm, sunshiny state. They move to Florida, and they come to Florida with their own interests, such as healthcare, Social Security, and the environment, that are particular to that group of people, where they're located and how they're living their lives now. And then there's the heritage factor. Particularly Florida's Cuban population, which is often counted as Hispanic or Latino, they don't vote the same way as other Latinos. So it's very maybe narrow-minded to view them as simply Hispanic or simply Latino, the way we might view, African Americans as tending to be. They strongly favor democratic institutions or democratic votes. Latinos are not necessarily that way, particularly within the Cuban population. And so their Cubans tend to favor the conservative Republicans, preferring its free capitalist, small government, and its stance on social issues. They also have strong ties to the Catholic government. This is, particularly because the Cuban population moved away from their communist government and from Fidel Castro, and they came here. So that has a strong influence on where they stand on issues today. Moving into national politics, Florida has 2 U.S. senators, as does every state. Rick Scott, Republican, and Marco Rubio, also Republican. They have 27 representatives in the House, 14 Republican and 13 Democrats. They have 29 electoral votes. No president has been from Florida. And like I said earlier, Florida is also a swing state. They did present 2 Republican primary contenders for the 2016 presidential election. That was Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush didn't make it very long. He was an early favorite, but by the Florida primaries, he was effectively out. Marco Rubio stayed in a little bit longer, but he lost by a double-digit lead to Donald Trump in the primary vote, including in his home state of Florida. He lost to Trump. The candidates also represented a split between the 2 major factions of the party. Jeb Bush was more along the mainstream, pragmatic conservatism, and Marco Rubio is the more radical element tied to the Tea Party. Some more information about national level politics. I wanted to include this. This is from 2018. It's from an NBC Marist poll. It's provided by the Brookings Institute. It was the top issues for registered Florida voters at the time. And those top issues were healthcare, immigration, and gun control. Guns, particularly because Florida was home to 2 mass casualty shootings, one in 2016 at the nightclub and the other in 2018 at the high school. And so you can see, if you look, some of these issues, like Democrats care about healthcare, then immigration, then guns, whereas Republicans care about immigration, healthcare, and then gun control. So different order, same top 3 issues though. And particularly, Floridians also already deal with climate change. So this is something else that is unique for Floridians. They have more intense storms, higher insurance rates, and in Miami, in southern parts of the state, the water literally creeps up out of the ocean from the drains and into the streets. So they can really see climate change in a way that people in many parts of the rest of the country can't see. So all these issues are led by a variety of cultures and ethnicities within the state. So it really leads to them having, a vastly different populace than many other parts of the South. So current events, Florida has a new rise in COVID-19 cases. This is very recent. Their 7-day average was below 3,000 cases from early September through mid-October. Cases are rising again, with new weekly averages spiking above 3,000 cases. They do not have a statewide mask mandate, but there are several large metropolitan areas that do require masks. And this was a really interesting thing to me. There's been so much money spent on political campaign ads in Florida. So over $250 million has been spent on presidential campaign ads. That's higher than any other state. And part of the reason why is because the polls between the 2 candidates are very, very tight. You know, Trump won Florida in 2016, and he really wants to win it again in 2020. But so does Biden, and so they both have a lot of money, and they're doing a lot of spending in Florida. Florida also allows all voters to use mail-in ballots, and similarly to Texas, both of their senators have supported Amy Coney Barrett in her nomination for Supreme Court Justice. In fact, Rick Scott took time on the Senate floor to push for her nomination. And that's all. I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation, my lecture, and I hope you learned something about Florida and its population and its politics. And I hope that helps you understand Florida in relation to the rest of the South and the nation as a whole.